DM Dungeon Mastery here again with a different type of video for you all today. This is a first and possibly a new series if the feedback bodes well. A friend of the channel reached out to me not too long ago with a proposal and I gladly accepted. This video has been in the works for quite some time. It took a lot of tender love and care being put into it behind the scenes, and I think you're gonna like what we have for you. So without further ado, allow me to pass the mic over to friend of the channel, August from TTRPGenius.
Thank you, DM. My name is August with TTRPGenius, and on my channel we break down game lore, create interesting new creatures or variants with PDFs explaining how they fit into your world, tactics, battle maps, and or stat blocks. And we also make encounters for the DMs out there who, let's face it, in this chaotic world have very little time on their hands to prepare for tonight's game. I help with specialized session prep for those in my Discord and enjoy explaining lore and game questions. If that sounds up your alley, stop on by my Discord and be one of the first 100 people to get the exclusive OG Original Genius badge showing that you're a real day oneer. Now that we have all the plugs out of the way, let's get on to why you're really here, and let's break down the lore of the Meglomortis. About a month ago, I reached out to DM and asked if he wanted to do a collaboration on a video. He was looking at updating an old creation of his, the Meglomortis. Coming from the base word of megalomania, this huge undead giant comes in at a whopping CR 25. Now, the Meglomortis isn't just another undead behemoth, it's a living catastrophe, a manifestation of death's inevitable grip on life. When a Meglomortis appears, it is not by chance, but as the result of a profane and ancient ritual that involves the potent substance necrothine. Now, we'll get into necrothine here just in a moment, but let me tell you, this stuff is deadly. It is not something you want to come in contact with. This undead creature embodies the raw destructive forces of undeath, and its presence signifies far more than just a tough encounter. It is a looming harbinger of doom. This is a creature that you allude to and build up over several sessions, if not the whole campaign. It makes a great BBEG, and let's find out why. But before we get into that, we need to talk about necrothine. Necrothine is a dark liquid that's not created from ordinary alchemical means. It's the decomposing remains of a primordial god of undeath, long fallen yet still potent in post-mortem. The god's name has been lost to the annals of time, forgotten by the world, and the only ones who still remember pieces of its story are the giants. The god once walked the same primordial realms as the giants' ancestors. This god's influence seeped into the fabric of creation, leaving traces of its essence in certain giant bloodlines. When a giant consumes necrothine, their ancient connection to this god's essence allows their body to resist the complete destruction, instead transforming them into the Meglomortis. While other creatures would be dissolved by the necrothine's corrosive power, the giant's ancient lineage binds them to the primordial god's undeath, allowing the fluids to animate their corpse rather than annihilating it, turning them into a powerful undead entity. Necrothine carries traces of this god's ancient malice, a power so vile that its touch spells doom to any living creature. It is described as being blacker than pitch, unnaturally heavy like tar, and the consistency of congealing oil. It reeks of sulfur and decomposition with a subtle nauseating sweetness. As it makes contact with living matter, it sizzles and bubbles violently, dissolving organic tissues, leaving rot in its place. Necrothine possesses a dark and insidious power that extends beyond mere destruction. It can also reanimate the dead. When a living creature succumbs to its corrosive effects, their life force is violently severed, and the fluid seeps into their corpse, intertwining with their essence. Within moments, the remnants of their souls are drawn back from the void, compelled by the primordial god of undeath's lingering influence embedded in the necrothine. This process isn't a gentle return to life. No, instead, it ignites a violent transformation, turning the once living creature into a mindless servitor, stripped of its former self. The animated corpse is now a twisted reflection of its former life, driven by an insatiable hunger for the living, and bound to the will of the Meglomortis, or any other being capable of wielding necrothine. As such, the dark liquid becomes a conduit of dread, transforming death into a tool of of terror and domination. Now, as stated earlier, necrothine is tar-like and it's very sticky. Not only that, it almost seems to have a will of its own. Once it's on you, it does not want to get off. It is very corrosive and it reduces the affected creature's ability to move their bodies. A cool tidbit you can add for your in-game world lore is even if the wound necrothine leaves behind is healed by magic, it still scars. Ordinary water won't wash away necrothine, but dousing a creature in 10 gallons of water using spells like Create Water can slow its spread, buying maybe about 6 seconds for a more permanent removal. Adventurers might discover or craft an antidote or neutralizing salve using alchemy. They would need to gather rare ingredients, possibly from areas already affected by undeath. They can also seek out ancient knowledge related to the primordial god tied to necrothine. A surefire way to remove it is applying radiant energy from spells like Sacred Flame that can cauterize the necrothine on the surface. Though this does deal damage to the afflicted target, so any amount of radiant damage done to a target covered in necrothine will cause it to dissolve but could hurt your friend. As a last resort, a creature can decide to remove parts of the affected flesh by using mundane means. It does take an action and the affected creature can cut away the necrothine. This does deal 6d6 damage to itself though, so be careful, it's not a great way to get rid of it. Now that we know what necrothine is, let's talk about the ritual used to create the Meglomortis and why not anybody can just become one. The ritual for a giant to transform into a Meglomortis is a grueling and nightmarish process. Sometimes known amongst the giantkin as the necrothine ascension, the ritual begins with a giant consuming a substantial amount of necrothine. While DM and I were working on what the ritual would entail, he brought up the movie Primordius. If you've seen the introduction scene, you know what we're talking about. Once it's been ingested, the giant must wade into the lake filled with the same foul liquid. As they stand waist deep in the deadly sludge, they slowly begin to submerge themselves until fully enveloped. Over the next 8 days, 8 hours, and 8 minutes, the giant remains submerged. It is suspended in a horrific stasis where the body is broken down and reshaped by the god's necromantic influences. During this time, the giant experiences excruciating pain, their body dissolving as the necrothine ravishes their living flesh. The liquid corrodes every part of their being, both physically and spiritually, reducing the giant to a husk of what they once were. In their mind, visions of the primordial god dominates their thoughts. They see the images of the god, grotesque and skeletal in nature, towering over them. The giant's flesh continues to wither and decay, and as they near death on the 8th day, the god's power takes hold. Instead of a final rest, the necrothine binds their soul to a physical shell, animating their decayed body with necromantic energy. Now you might ask why a giant would go through this much pain and suffering, and that's a fair question, because there really isn't a good answer. Some believe that it's similar to lichdom to become more powerful and to live eternally, but even then, as we're about to find out, that's not really what happens. At the end of this painful period, the body of the giant rises from the lake. It hovers just above the surface, held aloft by the sheer force of undeath. The Meglomortis is born, its form resembling that of the primordial god of undeath, twisted, hollow, and emaciated. This rebirth is not one of salvation, but of eternal torment and power, spreading death and corruption wherever it goes. Though the Meglomortis retains fragments of the giant that they once were, the grueling transformation through necrothine irreversibly warps their mind and body. Faint echoes of the giant's memories and personality linger, but they are twisted and corrupted by the agonizing rebirth. What remains is a hollow, tormented shell of their former self, driven by the will of the primordial god. Any sense of their original identity is buried beneath their once great strength, now fueled by necromantic power and boundless malevolence. They are, in essence, a puppet of the god, with only the fleeting glimpses of their former life haunting them in rare moments of dark clarity. The Meglomortis layers near the lake of necrothine that it was created from. Perhaps in a ruined castle, a cave network on or under the lake, or in the first place that they destroyed, like a village, town, or city. Wherever the layer is, it is always covered in pools of necrothine. Within 1 mile of the layer, necrothine tears and hordes of undead roam the territory in droves. All plant life is withered and dead. No living creature, willingly at least, will remain in the area. Color surrounding the Meglomortis' lair begins to fade, and the sky turns gray as if to say even the heavens aren't allowed in its domain. We'll let DM break down the lair actions and what all it can do in the stat block, but before I go, I want to thank you all for listening. You can download the PDF with all the lore we just went over and more, including how to prepare for the battle and battle tactics. This 120 by 90 square battle map with these 3 variations, and my own contribution, the necrothine tier, which the necrothine tier can be summoned by either the Meglomortis or its lair. They are black oozes made of necrothine and are controlled in a manner similar to telepathy by the Meglomortis, as their minds are linked so long as they're on the same plane of existence. If the Meglomortis dies or the tier is teleported to another plane of existence, the necrothine tier immediately dies, triggering its death burst ability. Remember, the Meglomortis can be healed by necrotic damage, and the necrothine tier has many attacks and its death burst ability that it can use to aid and heal its master. Now let's hand this back over to DM Dungeon Mastery.
Thank you, August. And now with our lore churning in your brains, giving you all the evil ideas to spring upon your party, let's break down the Meglomortis stat block and see what we're working with. Alright, so here we have the Meglomortis. This is an original creation from yours truly, made from scratch, with a little bit of help from August, with some ideas and things of that nature, but let's get into it. So we have a huge undead. So the Meglomortis is an undead giant. It is chaotic evil. There is no reasoning with this creature. It is evil for the sake of being evil. Its armor class is 21. Very high, very scary. This is meant to be a endgame boss fight creature. Its hit points are 405, 30d12 plus 210 from its constitution. It has a 45-foot flying speed, and it hovers around like this emaciated, undead creature that it is. It's very creepy. Let's look at the ability scores. So we have a 16 strength, 13 dexterity, 24 con, 18 intelligence, 22 wisdom, 13 charisma. Pretty dangerous at first glance. The constitution and the wisdom are very high. Constitution being the highest, that's actually going to be its spellcasting ability. Its spellcasting ability. So let's move into the resistances, proficiencies in languages, immunities, etc. So saving throw proficiencies. So we have a constitution saving throw, an intelligence, and a wisdom saving throw proficiency. All incredibly high. If your players target the creature with these saving throws, it's most likely going to succeed. It's got a perception of plus 22. Rogues are going to have a very hard time hiding from this creature. Now, you'll see it does have a vulnerability to radiant damage, so there is a weakness. This creature is not invincible. It's not an adversarial monster just meant to cause a TPK. There is a weakness. It's got a resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, just a flat-out resistance to magical or non-magical. But then you come down to the immunities. It has a cold, necrotic, poison, psychic immunity, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. So actually, if you don't have a magical weapon, you cannot damage the Meglomortis. Condition immunities: blinded, charmed, exhaustion, frightened, poisoned, prone, unconscious. Your typical things for a creature that is hovering, almost like a beholder, but also this is undead, so it's got those undead resistances as well, and this is my undead creatures usually have these things. It has a blind sight of 120 feet, passive perception of 32, so you're going to have to roll a nat 20 on your stealth check or a 32 to hide from this creature. It speaks giant, primordial, and it understands common. Challenge rating 25, proficiency bonus plus 8. Let's get into the special traits, because these are very important with this creature. So the first one you're going to see, this is the big undead ability that I put on most of my undead that are raised from the Grave, this is necrotic absorption. So when the Meglomortis takes necrotic damage, it regains that many hit points instead. It has magic weapons. It has undead fortitude. It has death burst. Death burst is typically very rare. I only know of the Bay lore having death burst, but it's fun to add this onto creatures because you're going to see this is a pretty dangerous one. So when the Meglomortis dies, it explodes in a burst of necrothine. Each creature within 30 feet must make a DC 23 Dex save. On a failure, they take 10 D10 necrotic damage, and the creature's maximum HP is reduced by the damage taken this way. On a success, they take half damage, and the creature's maximum HP is reduced by the damage taken this way. HP lost this way can only be restored by a regenerate or a wish spell. So yes, very deadly is necrothine. We've pretty much hammered home the idea that this liquid, this sludge, came from an undead primordial god. That was my idea when I created this creature. And I think if you have some sort of power from a god within it, that thing should be incredibly powerful. This is a primordial god of undeath, so very dangerous to any living matter whatsoever. Now let's go, we have a fear aura also. This is pretty dangerous. So any living creature within 60 feet of the Meglomortis that starts its turn there must make a DC 23 wisdom saving throw. On a failure, it is frightened for 1 minute. If the save fails by 5 or more, it falls unconscious for 1 minute until damaged or awoken, and it remains frightened until its next turn. On a success, it's immune to the fear aura for 24 hours. So if you can see, actually you don't even need to see it, just in the vicinity of this creature is this aura that could cause you to fall unconscious from fright. Essentially you pass out. You don't drop 0 hit points from this, but you do faint essentially. Next thing you're going to see, turn immunity. Yeah, unfortunately, clerics, you're not going to be able to turn undead against the Meglomortis. It is far beyond that power in your kit. Legendary resistance. There was somebody in my comments that said, when you think you make a creature powerful for high-level play, slap yourself and make it 3 times as powerful. So I kind of listened to that guy a little bit. Legendary resistances, I gave it 4 legendary resistances. So this really is the end game boss of your campaign. Or if you're a mean DM, it's a random encounter, though I really would not recommend that. This should be a very long-winded quest line with this creature as the boss at the end of it. So this is end game stuff we're talking about. Now let's get into the actions. Alright, so I made sure to make this creature as powerful as possible without making it adversarial. So, the Meglomortis makes 4 attacks, 1 with its Words of the Dead God, and 3 in any combination with its Withered Claws or Sunken Sockets. So, Words of the Dead God, this is the first attack action here. The Meglomortis utters a deep, incomprehensible string of words. Each creature within 15 feet must succeed on a DC 23 con save. On a failure, that creature takes 4d12 necrotic damage. So, the Meglomortis is uttering the words of this undead primordial god that is reverberating in this creature, and it's unleashing it for the living to hear. So, very deadly. Let's move to the Withered Claws now. So, Wretched Swipe is its first attack. It does slashing damage, and if you're a huge or smaller creature, you are lacerated, and the slashing damage is 3d6. Lacerated means you take 2 slashing damage at the end of each of your turns until you receive magical healing or a DC 10 medicine check from a healer's kit. You'll see why it needs to have creatures lacerated next. Hemodrain is the second ability. Only can target lacerated or bleeding targets. So this does 7d6 necrotic damage, and the Meglomortis regains HP equal to the necrotic damage dealt this way. That is what is going to make this creature incredibly powerful. It's going to constantly be healing 7d6 worth of damage off of you if you are bleeding. So the final action we have here is, it's a giant, so I have to give it the grab action. So you could technically do 2 of these per turn. It could technically try to grab something, well, technically 3 times, but it can only grab 2 creatures, so it could take 3 chances to attempt to grab a creature, up to 2. So this is your basic grab attack from my giant stat blocks. A creature within 5 feet of the Meglomortis has to succeed on a DC 19 Dex save. On a failure, the creature is grappled and restrained. And then it says in italics, the Meglomortis can grapple up to 2 creatures. While grappling this way, it cannot use its claws on creatures other than the grappled targets. Pretty self-explanatory. Let's keep on moving here because it just gets worse the further we go down this stat block. We have withered sockets, so these are the eye sockets of this creature, and these have a much higher to hit than the melee attacks, you'll see, because this is a creature that is more akin to a giant version of a lich than anything. So Necro Bolt, these all have plus 14 to hit, and they have 120 feet range on them. So Necro Bolt is the first thing. It does 3d8 necrotic damage, and if you are a living creature, you cannot regain hit points until the start of the Meglomortis' next turn. That's another thing that's going to make this creature incredibly powerful. It is going to sever the healing capabilities of your party. You're going to be struggling fighting this monster, as you should be. At a CR 25, there is no pulling punches. This creature is the final boss. It is supposed to be very powerful. Disintegration Bolt is its second withered eye socket ability. Now I could use 3 of these in any combination, mind you. So Disintegration Bolt, this does 3d10 force damage. If this reduces a creature to 0 hit points, it is disintegrated, along with all non-magical items it wears or carries, reducing them to fine gray dust. The creature can only be restored by True Resurrection or a Wish spell. This spell automatically disintegrates a large or smaller non-magical object. For huge or larger targets, it disintegrates a 10-foot cube portion. So you can see this is a very powerful ability. This is if you drop to 0 hit points, it's an instant gone. You turn to ash. So yeah, this creature it's not playing softball anymore. So let's keep going. This is the big OP ability right here. This is Black Fulmination. The Meglomortis conjures a 20-foot radius sphere of pure necrothine from its body, and it hurls it at a point within 150 feet that it can see. Each living creature within the sphere must make a DC 23 Dex save. On a failure, living creatures take 12d6 necrotic damage and are drenched in necrothine for 1 minute. While coated in this liquid, the creature takes 6d6 necrotic damage at the start of each of its turns, its movement speed is halved, and it has disadvantage on constitution saves. It cannot regain HP also. If you succeed this, you take half damage and you are not drenched in necrothine. Now there is a tutorial within the PDF that's going to be coming alongside this creature that'll tell you everything you need to know about necrothine. Let's keep moving though, because we're not done, into the bonus actions. The bonus actions are going off of the assumption that a creature is already grappled by the Meglomortis. So you can't use these unless it is grappling something, otherwise it doesn't do anything. So Fling is the first one. Now this can also be used with an object, so if there's an object nearby, like a tree or something, the Meglomortis could pick that up and throw it. It could rip it out of the ground. It's going to be sort of a way to get distance between it and a creature that is problematic. So it throws a creature up to 60 feet, and that creature takes 1d6 bludgeoning damage for every 10 feet thrown, and it lands prone. If it's thrown at another creature, that creature must make a DC 19 Dex save, or it takes the same damage and is also knocked prone. Even worse, if he uses this and he's near that lake of necrothine, like you will see in the PDF, he could throw the paladin into that lake, and that's not going to be a good time. But of course, your players probably have wishes and other things at this level. This is assuming your players are fully kitted to the teeth, absolutely, utterly OP. So this is a creature that is meant to combat things of that nature. So also, let's move into the final bonus action. This is Black Tears. The Meglomortis lets loose a stream of necrothine from its eye sockets onto a creature it's holding. The creature must make a DC 23 con save. On a failure, it takes 8d8 necrotic damage and is poisoned for 1 minute. While poisoned this way, it cannot regain HP. If it is reduced to 0 hit points, it dies and it raises as a zombie under its control at the start of the Meglomortis' next turn. If you succeed that DC 23 con save, you take half damage and you resist the poison. Now, I also included zombie stat blocks to go along with the Meglomortis, so if a creature does turn into a zombie, the Meglomortis has special zombies that spread undeath along with it. Let's go into the final part of this stat block, the legendary actions. Now, with these legendary actions, the Meglomortis gets 4 legendary actions on a per round of combat, so that's going to be very, very difficult and hard to deal with. There's a reason why the Meglomortis doesn't make 8 attacks with its multi-attack. This is why. So, Spurn the Living is its first legendary action. This costs 1 legendary action, and it just makes an attack with its wretched claws or sunken sockets. The second one, Hovering Death. The Meglomortis moves up to its speed without provoking opportunity attacks. Those are both 1 cost legendary actions. Now here's when we start getting into the more expensive ones. Overwhelming Doom. The Meglomortis uses Black Fulmination. Now this is a pretty dangerous one because Black Fulmination is its signature move that's very powerful. So if that's off cooldown from its recharge, that's going to be very hard to deal with. The second to last legendary action we have here is Weeping Creation. Now this is a dangerous one as well. The Meglomortis lets loose a stream of necrothine from its eye sockets that pulls and congeals into a necrothine tear that acts on its initiative. So this is a summoning ability. Creates a necrothine tear. Those creatures moving along with the Meglomortis in its lair are going to make this fight an absolute nightmare. People might get mad and say this is too strong. I don't think anything beyond CR20 can be too strong unless it just has a flat out, destroy the world as a bonus action. There's making things that are meant to challenge high level characters, and there's making things that aren't strong enough to challenge high level characters. Most of the stuff straight out of the book, you're gonna have to homebrew yourself, or it's just gonna get steamrolled, unfortunately. Wizards literally have a spell that they can wish something just not be existent anymore. So when you take that into consideration, you have to make these creatures nearly OP, because even if you make them OP, the player characters are still going to probably defeat it in the end. Now, this creature, with how much damage it has, it's a race against time. It's a DPS race. This creature does so much damage. Let's get into the final legendary action here. This is last but not least. This is a curse that comes from the primordial god that it has been created from. So, this is Primordial Curse of Undeath. The Meglomortis targets up to 7 living creatures within 60 feet that it can see. The targets must succeed on a DC 23 Constitution save. On a failure, the creature is cursed. While cursed this way, the curse progresses in stages. 0 to 4 hours, the creature has a fever, and it feels weakened, suffering disadvantage on saving throws and ability checks. 8 hours, the creature becomes lethargic, suffering all prior symptoms, and has disadvantage on all attack rolls. At 12 hours, the creature slowly loses motor function and collapses. It drops to 0 hit points. No amount of healing can restore lost HP in this manner. The creature rises as a zombie within 1d10 minutes. Now we have a dormant reminder. If the cursed creature drops to 0 HP before the 12-hour mark, it dies and rises as a zombie within 1d10 minutes. The curse is incurable except by a wish spell after the creature has risen as a zombie, and that goes for even if it hits the 12-hour mark. And then I have a final thing with a little sun icon that tells you how to remove the curse, and it says the curse can be removed before it reaches the 12-hour mark with a remove curse spell. If the curse reaches the 12-hour mark, it is incurable except by a wish spell. So the reason why it has this is there needs to be a way, narratively speaking, how the Meglomortis is causing the curse of undeath to sweep across the land. Now, its zombies also have this ability with their bite attack, which you will see on my Patreon as a free member. So this is going up on my Patreon for free with a PDF that has the encounter laid out for you, how to implement it into your game world with the Meglomortis stat block, the necrothine tier stat block, and a zombie stat block, and I added a bonus one in with a zombie horde stat block. So you get a lot of bang for free. There's no bang for your buck, it's just bang. So I hope you guys like this one. This took a little bit longer than I would have liked to get done, but August from TTRPGenius helped me out. There's a couple spelling and grammatical mistakes in here that I noticed as I was reading through it, so I will probably try to fix those before I upload it to my Patreon page. This will be Patreon exclusive, and also this will be up on August's Patreon. So go check his channel out. The link will be in the description. This is DM Dungeon Mastery. Thank you, August from TTRPGenius, for this collaboration. I'm not saying goodnight. I'm just saying. I'll catch you guys in the next one.